The day my daughter-in-law told me the baby wasn't my son's, I believed her, because believing her felt kinder than trusting my own instincts. I remember the hum of the refrigerator more than her words. That low, steady sound filling the kitchen while she sat at my table, hands folded around a mug she never drank from. The sun was coming through the lace curtains just right, dust floating in the air like it always did around noon. Nothing about the room looked like a place where a family would quietly crack down the middle. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice so careful it almost sounded rehearsed. I nodded, already bracing myself. When you've lived long enough, your body learns to tense before your mind catches up. She didn't look at me when she said it, just stared at the tiny chip on the rim of her mug. The baby isn't your son's." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. My ears rang the way they do when your blood pressure spikes, and I had to swallow before I spoke. "What do you mean?" She lifted her eyes then, and they were glossy, practiced sad. "I mean, it couldn't be. The timing doesn't work." The timing. Such a neat, clean phrase for something that messy. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't accuse her of lying or throw questions at her like stones. I just sat there, feeling something inside me pull tight and thin, like a thread stretched too far. My son Daniel had been my only child, raised by me and his father in a modest house that always smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and whatever was cooking for dinner. We weren't perfect, but we were close. Or at least, I thought we were. When Daniel married Lena, I welcomed her the way my own mother had taught me to welcome family, with food, with space, and with trust. She was quiet at first, polite in that careful way that keeps you at arm's length. But she laughed at my husband's jokes and helped me wash dishes without being asked. I told myself that was enough. When she got pregnant, Daniel called me crying. Actually crying, my grown son. His voice breaking over the phone like a boy again. "Mama, I'm going to be a dad." I cried too. I prayed. I bought tiny socks and folded them into the dresser drawer in the guest room, just in case. So when Lena sat at my kitchen table and told me the baby wasn't his, my mind scrambled for balance. I thought of all the times I'd seen her rub her belly with that absent-minded tenderness. All the nights Daniel worked late while she sat alone on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I thought of how life isn't always kind, and how people make mistakes. "I haven't told Daniel," she said quickly, as if afraid I'd interrupt. "I wanted you to know first. I didn't want you hearing it from someone else." Someone else. That word lodged itself in my chest. I asked her if she was sure. She nodded. I asked her how long she'd known. She said she'd done the math 100 times in her head, over and over, until she couldn't pretend anymore. "And the father?" I asked softly. She shook her head. "He doesn't know. And he never will." There was something in the way she said that, firm, final, but I ignored it. I wanted to believe her because believing her meant I didn't have to imagine my son being deceived for months. Because believing her meant I could protect him somehow, even if it hurt. "I'll tell Daniel," she said. I need time." I told her to take it. I told her we'd figure things out. I told her she was still family. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her fingers cold. "Thank you," she whispered. After she left, I sat alone in that kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator kept humming. A car passed outside. Life went on in all the small ways it always does, even when something big has shifted. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside my husband, listening to his breathing, thinking about the kind of pain that changes people, thinking about how truth, when hidden too long, has a way of rotting everything around it. The days that followed slipped into a strange new rhythm. I smiled at Daniel when he came over. I hugged Lena gently, careful not to press too close to her belly, as if distance could protect me from my own feelings. I watched them together, searching for cracks, for signs, for anything that would make this make sense. Daniel talked about baby names. Painted the spare room a soft green. He asked me if I thought the crib should go by the window or the door. Each question felt like a small cut. I wanted to tell him. God knows I did. But Lena's words echoed in my head. The timing doesn't work, and I told myself it wasn't my secret to tell. I told myself I was doing the right thing by waiting. Rumors, though, have a way of finding light. A comment here. A look there. A neighbor asking a question that lingered just a little too long. One afternoon, my sister called me. People are talking, she said gently. About what? I asked, though I already knew. The baby, she said. About whether it's Daniel's. I felt my stomach drop. People should mind their own business. She agreed. But once a seed is planted, it doesn't matter how many times you tell yourself it won't grow. Lena suggested a DNA test. Just to stop the whispers, she said. So everyone can move on. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not fear. Something sharper. But I nodded, because trusting her was easier than facing what doubt might uncover. The envelope hadn't arrived yet. But when it did, it would carry more than answers. It would carry the kind of truth that rearranges a family forever. The days between agreeing to the DNA test and the envelope arriving stretched thin and tight, like a rubber band pulled too far. Every phone call made my heart jump. Every knock at the door made me flinch. I didn't tell my husband about the test, not yet. He'd always worn his emotions openly, and I was afraid of what might spill out before the truth was settled. Lena acted calm. Too calm, maybe. She still came by on Sundays, still asked if I wanted help peeling potatoes or folding laundry. Her hands moved steadily, but I noticed how often she washed them. How she rubbed her palms together when she thought no one was watching. Daniel, on the other hand, was restless. He paced when he talked, laughed a little too loudly. One evening, while we were painting the nursery together, he stopped mid-stroke and stared at the wall. "Mom," he said, not turning around. "You ever feel like people are looking at you different?" I dipped my brush back into the paint, buying myself a second. "People always look," I said. "Doesn't mean they see." He nodded slowly. "Lena says I'm imagining things." I didn't answer. The brush dragged a long, uneven line across the wall, and I cursed softly under my breath. Daniel smiled, teasing me about my artistic vision. And for a moment, we were just mother and son again, standing in a half-painted room with the smell of fresh paint thick in the air. But underneath it all, something was shifting. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. Plain white. No return address that meant anything to me. The mailman slid it through the slot, and it landed on the floor with a soft slap that sounded louder than it should have. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. My name was printed neatly on the front. Not Daniel's. Not Lena's. Mine. That should have been the first warning. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Lena had first told me the baby wasn't my son's, and turned the envelope over in my hands. The paper felt thin, fragile, like it might tear if I breathed too hard. I waited until my husband left for his afternoon walk before opening it. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to be alone with whatever was inside. My fingers shook as I slid the contents out. A single sheet. Black text on white paper. Clinical. Detached. I scanned for the word that mattered most. Probability of paternity. 99.98%. I read it again. And again. The room seemed to tilt just slightly. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. The baby was Daniel's. For a moment, relief washed over me so strong it made me dizzy. My son hadn't been betrayed. The whispers were wrong. The story I'd been holding together with fragile threads snapped back into place. Then the second wave hit. If the baby was Daniel's, why had Lena told me it wasn't? I read the paper more carefully then, forcing my eyes to slow down. That's when I noticed the other name on the document. Not Daniel's. Another mail sample. My brother's. My younger brother, Marcus. My heart dropped so hard I thought it might actually stop. Marcus had been a fixture in our lives forever. Family barbecues. Holidays. Sunday dinners. He'd babysat Daniel when he was small. He'd been the fun uncle, the one with pockets full of candy and stories about road trips and old mistakes. He'd also been around a lot during Lena's pregnancy, offering to help with repairs, dropping by unannounced, sitting a little too close on the couch. I told myself it meant nothing. Family is family after all. The test didn't just say Daniel was the father. It said Marcus wasn't, which meant Lena hadn't been confused. She'd lied, and she'd used my own brother to do it. I folded the paper slowly, my hands steady now in a way that scared me. A cold clarity had settled in my chest, sharp and clean. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. That evening, I asked Lena to come over alone. She arrived just after sunset, the sky bruised purple and gray. She sat where she always did, hands folded, eyes careful. I placed the envelope on the table between us. It came, I said. She swallowed. And I slid the paper toward her. She didn't touch it. Didn't look at it. Her eyes stayed on my face, searching. It says the baby is Daniel's, I continued. And it says Marcus is not. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to press against my ears. Finally, she let out a long breath. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. That was the moment my anger flared. Not hot and wild, but deep and burning. Then why did you say what you said? I asked quietly. Why did you tell me my grandchild wasn't my son's? Her shoulders sagged. Because I needed time. Time for what? She hesitated, and in that pause, I saw something crumble. To fix things, she said. To make it go away. I laughed then, a short, bitter sound that surprised us both. Babies don't go away, I said. And lies don't fix themselves. Tears filled her eyes, real this time. Marcus told me he'd help, she said. He said if people thought it was his, Daniel wouldn't look so foolish if the truth came out later. My brother. My blood. I felt something tear inside me, slow and painful. So you were willing to destroy my son's trust, I said. To protect your own image? She shook her head. I was trying to protect all of us. No, I said softly. You were protecting yourself. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Daniel doesn't know, she said. Please, let me tell him. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You've had months, I said. I won't take his voice away too. She left not long after, her step slow, heavy. I locked the door behind her and leaned against it. The weight of what I'd learned pressing down on me. The betrayal wasn't just hers. It was family deep. And I knew, with a certainty that settled into my bones, that nothing would be the same once Daniel knew the truth. I didn't tell Daniel that night. I told myself I needed sleep. I told myself I needed to think. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid of the look that would cross my son's face when the ground fell out from under him. Afraid of hearing my own voice say words that could never be taken back. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's name on that paper. My brother. The man who'd stood beside me at my wedding. Who'd helped carry my father's casket. Who'd sworn more than once that family was the only thing that mattered. By morning, my fear had hardened into resolve. Daniel deserved the truth. And I would not let another lie touch him. I asked him to come over that afternoon. Just him. No Lena. He arrived with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, carrying a bag of takeout like a peace offering. Figured you might not feel like cooking, he said. I took the bag from his hands and set it aside unopened. We need to talk, I said. Something in my tone must have reached him, because his smile faded. He sat at the table, posture stiff, hands resting flat on the wood like he was bracing himself. I sat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. Mom, he said finally, you're scaring me. I slid the envelope across the table. What's this, he asked. The DNA results, I said. My voice sounded steady, though my heart was pounding. I wasn't supposed to open them alone, but they came addressed to me. He frowned, then pulled the paper out. I watched his eyes move across the page, watched his brow furrow, watched confusion give way to relief. It says I'm the father, he said, looking up quickly. So why did Lena? Keep reading, I said gently. He did. The color drained from his face. What is Uncle Marcus's name doing here? He asked. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them back. Lena told me the baby wasn't yours, I said. She told me she thought it was Marcus's. Daniel stared at the paper like it might rearrange itself if he looked long enough. That doesn't make any sense, he whispered. She lied, I said. About the timing. About the reason. About everything. He pushed his chair back abruptly and stood up, pacing the kitchen in tight circles. His hands went to his hair, fingers digging in like he was trying to hold himself together. So she told you the baby wasn't mine, he said slowly, but then agreed to a DNA test she knew would prove it was? Yes. Why? His voice cracked on the word. I hesitated, then told him the truth. About Marcus. About the plan. About the lie meant to soften a future blow that never needed to exist. Daniel stopped pacing. He stood very still, staring at the floor. She let me believe, he swallowed. She watched me paint that room. Talk about names. Make plans. And she let me think I might not be that child's father. The pain in his voice cut deep. This wasn't anger yet. This was grief. I'm so sorry, I said. He looked at me then, eyes red, jaw tight. Did Uncle Marcus know? Yes. That was all it took. He let out a sound I'd never heard from him before. Not a shout, not a cry, but something broken and raw. He grabbed his keys from the counter. Daniel, I said, standing. Where are you going? To get answers, he said. From both of them. He left before I could stop him. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I sat by the window, watching the street, jumping at every sound. I called my brother once. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. When Daniel finally returned, it was dark outside. He came in slowly, like every step hurt. He sat down across from me, his shoulders slumped. She admitted it, he said. All of it. I waited. She said she was scared, he continued. That she didn't know how to tell me she'd let people think I wasn't the father. That Marcus convinced her it would be easier this way. My stomach twisted. And Marcus? Daniel let out a hollow laugh. He said he was trying to protect me. I closed my eyes. That's what cowards say when they're caught. Daniel nodded. I told him to stay away from me. From my family. From my child. Pride and sorrow tangled in my chest. And Lena? He was quiet for a long moment. I told her to leave, he said. At least for now. I reached across the table and took his hand. It felt colder than usual. I don't know what I'm going to do, he said. I love her. But I don't recognize her anymore. Trust doesn't break loudly, I said softly. It breaks in silence. And putting it back together takes time. He squeezed my hand. I'm glad you told me. That night my phone rang again. Marcus. I answered. You didn't have to do this, he said without greeting. Yes, I replied calmly, I did. I was trying to help, he insisted. You helped yourself, I said. And you hurt my son. Silence. I never thought you'd choose him over me, he said finally. I felt a sad smile touch my lips. I didn't choose, I said. You did. I hung up. In the days that followed, the truth spread like it always does. Quietly at first. Then louder. Whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into judgment. Lena moved out temporarily. Daniel took time off work. My husband learned everything, his disappointment deep and wordless. And me? I stood in the middle of it all, holding what was left of my family, learning that love doesn't mean shielding people from the truth. It means trusting them with it. But the hardest consequences were still ahead. Because when betrayal comes from your own blood, healing doesn't happen all at once. It comes in pieces. The house felt quieter after everything came out. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Even the old clock in the hallway seemed to tick softer. As if time didn't want to draw attention to itself. I moved through my days carefully, choosing my words the way one chooses steps on cracked ice. Daniel stayed with us for a while. He slept in his childhood room, the one with the faded baseball posters and the dresser I'd painted blue when he was 10. At night, I could hear him pacing, the floorboards creaking in a familiar rhythm that made my chest ache. Some mornings he'd sit at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee long after it went cold. Other days he'd talk non-stop, about work, about the baby, about nothing at all. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. Neither does betrayal. Lena called once. I didn't answer. Marcus tried twice. I blocked his number. The rest of the family found out in pieces. My sister came by with a casserole, and a look that said she didn't know whether to hug me or apologize. An aunt left a voicemail filled with prayers and carefully chosen silence about blame. No one wanted to say what everyone was thinking. That this kind of fracture doesn't just split a marriage. It reshapes an entire family. One afternoon, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He dropped his keys on the counter and sat down heavily. "She wants to talk," he said. "I didn't ask who. I already knew. She's staying with her sister," he continued. "She says she's going to counseling. She says she knows she messed up." I stirred the soup on the stove, the spoon scraping softly against the pot. "And what do you want?" I asked. He sighed. "I want the truth to stop changing." That night he went to see her. I prayed while he was gone. Not the kind of prayer you say out loud, but the quiet ones you carry in your chest. The ones that ask for strength, not miracles. When he came back, his eyes were tired but clearer. "She told me everything," he said. "About the lies. About Marcus. About why she panicked." "And?" I asked. "And I told her that whatever happens next has to be built on honesty," he said. "Even if it hurts." Weeks passed. The baby arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Daniel called me from the hospital, his voice trembling, not with fear, but with awe. "Mom," he said, "she's here." I cried then. The kind of crying that leaves you lightheaded. Life, stubborn and beautiful, had arrived in the middle of all this mess. At the hospital, Lena looked smaller than I remembered, worn thin by guilt and childbirth. She held the baby like something precious and fragile. "She has your eyes," Daniel said, smiling through tears. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. When Lena looked up at me, her eyes filled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded. "I know." I held my granddaughter for the first time then. She smelled like clean linen and new beginnings. Her tiny hand wrapped around my finger with surprising strength. In that moment, the weight of anger loosened its grip. Not gone, but softened. Marcus did not come to the hospital. He sent a message instead. Daniel never replied. Months later, my brother and I sat across from each other in a small cafe. It was his idea. I almost didn't go. He looked older. Smaller somehow. "I messed up," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I was jealous," he admitted. "Of you. Of Daniel. Of the life you built." I listened. I didn't interrupt. Forgiveness doesn't always mean forgetting, but it does mean hearing. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," he said. "They won't," I answered honestly. "But they might become something else. If you let them." We parted without hugging. Healing is slow work. Daniel and Lena didn't rush their reconciliation. They talked. They argued. They sat in silence. Trust, once broken, has to be rebuilt brick by brick. I stayed close but didn't interfere. This was their marriage to mend, or not. Through it all, I learned something about my own strength. About the kind of mother I wanted to be. About how truth, no matter how painful, is the only soil where real love can grow. Some nights, I still think about that envelope. About how a single piece of paper changed everything. But when I watch my granddaughter sleep, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, I know that not all endings are losses. Some are beginnings disguised as heartbreak. Life didn't snap back into place after the baby came home. It eased. Slowly. Carefully. Like a bone that had to be set, and then protected while it healed. Daniel moved back into his house after a few months. Lena returned too, but not as if nothing had happened. They moved around each other with a new awareness, like people who had learned, too late, how fragile things really are. They went to counseling every Thursday evening. Sometimes Daniel would come by afterward, sit at my kitchen table, and talk through the quiet parts. Not the arguments. The silences. The moments when you want to ask a question but you're afraid of the answer. "I don't know if I can ever forget," he told me once, rubbing his temples the way he used to when he was a teenager. "You don't have to forget," I said. "You just have to decide what you can live with." That answer didn't solve anything, but it steadied him. Sometimes that's all a mother can do. Lena tried, in her own way, to make amends. She didn't push herself into my space anymore. She waited. She asked. She showed up when invited and stayed quiet when she wasn't. I watched her closely, not with suspicion but with attention. People reveal themselves when they think no one is looking. One afternoon, I found her rocking the baby on the back porch, humming softly. The boards creaked beneath my feet as I stepped outside. She looked up, startled, then relaxed. "I didn't hear you," she said. "That's all right," I replied, sitting in the chair across from her. The baby slept peacefully, her tiny fist tucked under her chin. "I think about what I did every day," Lena said suddenly. "Not just the lie, but the way I used people. The way I let fear make my choices." I nodded. "Fear is persuasive," I said. "But it's never honest." She looked down at her daughter. "I don't want her to grow up thinking lies are how you survive." "That's a good place to start," I said. We sat in silence after that, the kind that doesn't demand to be filled. Marcus stayed away. At first, I was angry about that. Then I realized distance was the only thing he could offer without causing more harm. My husband grieved the loss of that relationship quietly. Men of his generation rarely talk about their heartbreaks. They just carry them differently. At a family gathering months later, Marcus didn't show. Some people asked. Most didn't. Absence has a way of becoming its own answer. The community eventually moved on, as communities do. New gossip replaced the old. Fresh scandals took center stage. But inside our family, things were forever marked by what had happened. Not ruined, marked. Daniel became a different father than I expected. More patient. More present. It was as if nearly losing his place in his child's life had sharpened his love. He changed diapers without complaint. Sang lullabies off-key. Woke in the night at the smallest sound. One evening, I watched him cradle his daughter while Lena slept on the couch beside him. Exhaustion written across her face. He caught me looking and smiled. "I almost missed all this," he said softly. "But you didn't," I replied. He shook his head. "Only because you told the truth." That stayed with me. There are moments in life when silence feels easier. Kinder even. But silence can be a betrayal of its own. I learned that love doesn't always mean protecting people from pain. It means respecting them enough to trust them with reality. As the months turned into a year, something unexpected happened. Laughter returned. Not the careless kind, but the earned kind. The kind that comes after storms. Lena and I found a rhythm. Not the one we had before, but one that felt honest. She never assumed forgiveness. She let it grow naturally, like a plant that needs time and light. One afternoon, she handed me a small envelope. "I wrote something," she said. "You don't have to read it." I did. It wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement. Of harm done. Of trust broken. Of gratitude for truth, even when it came at a cost. I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer, beside old photographs and birthday cards. Proof that people can change, if they're willing to face themselves. When my granddaughter took her first steps, Daniel called me first. When she said her first word, it was "Mama," followed closely by a garbled attempt at "Grandma." I laughed until my sides hurt. Marcus eventually reached out again. This time, not with excuses, just with accountability. We speak now sparingly, carefully. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt the same way they were before. And me? I learned that being the keeper of truth is a heavy responsibility, but it's also a privilege. It means people trust you to stand steady when things fall apart. The envelope that once felt like a weapon turned out to be a mirror. It showed us who we were, and who we needed to become. Families aren't defined by the secrets they keep. They're defined by the truths they survive. When I look back now, I don't remember the exact words on that DNA paper as much as I remember how my hands felt holding it. Cold, steady, heavier than paper should ever be. Truth has weight like that. Not because it wants to hurt us, but because it asks us to stand upright and carry it with dignity. I learned something in that season of my life that no book ever taught me. Love doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. Love means refusing to let lies decide the future of the people you care about. Even when telling the truth costs you comfort. Even when it fractures relationships you thought were unbreakable. I also learned that betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes wrapped in familiar voices, shared memories, and blood ties. And that kind of betrayal cuts deepest. Not because it's cruel, but because it's unexpected. But here's the part people don't talk about enough. Truth doesn't just tear things apart. It also clears the ground. It makes space for something more honest to grow. What came after the pain wasn't perfection. It was real. Real apologies. Real effort. Real love, no longer built on fear. My family didn't go back to what it was before. But we became something sturdier. Something that could survive honesty. So I'll ask you this, quietly, the way Auntie May always does. If you were holding that envelope, if you knew the truth would break hearts before it healed them, would you have opened it anyway? And if you're living with a truth right now that's heavy in your hands, I hope this story reminds you that you're not weak for telling it. And you're not wrong for wanting peace on the other side of it. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it touched something in you, share your thoughts below. And if you've lived a truth like this, you're not alone.